Welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J. Clay. Taking a look at a 14-game slate here on DraftKings, and we got some nice values and some interesting price tags. I mean, we talked about some pitching options. Obviously kind of Sale and Samardzija, but I mean, overall, I mean, there's kind of something to like, everywhere tonight.
Yeah, you never like the mid-range more than the high-end guys, but for some of these positions tonight, I just think I'd rather honestly be in the 3K range than the 4K. So something to definitely, and we'll obviously talk about it, but something to definitely get a little excited about,
Which is nice because, I mean, paying up for pitching, you're going to sit in that range. So, I mean, if you're liking those, you feel pretty good.
Right.
Looking at catcher, and, you got some options here. Catchers haven't been relatively too expensive of late. I feel like we've kind of sit them. They're all constantly below 4,000, which, hey, I'm not complaining. But I mean, usually we see a Posey and McCann up there about 42, 43, and that's just not the case anymore.
And I mean, they have been inconsistent this year, but we do see, even on shorter slates, like one or two guys hit a homer a night, so it's not like there's no production coming from there. In terms of options, though, I think Perez is all right again. Posey, obviously, always in play. I think he's my number one here tonight. And I think Wieters, we doing it?
I like Wieters a lot.
Yeah.
I'm looking for him to probably be my number one cash guy.
Okay.
Granted, he's in the lineup because I feel like every night I want to actually use him. He's never in the lineup, but he's had 2 days off, so hopefully he's back in there. But Fister, I mean, since 2014, 324 WOBA allowed in that ballpark.
Right.
Wieters hit the ball, 371 over the last 10 games. So coming around, I think that price tag kind of just suits him in that game.
Yeah, and if you want to swerve off of that, I think Cervelli versus Shelby Miller is something to at least take a hard look at. Saves you a little salary off the top guys, and he's in a pretty good spot.
Anyone lower you're looking at?
We kind of been playing around with Tommy Joseph, but he's not really in play tonight. I wouldn't really touch him against Verlander. Perez against Perez?
Just for the narrative?
Yeah. Narrative Street? No, I think I'm pretty much staying in that. 3,100 isn't killing you. So, and obviously, as we always talk about, there's always going to be that 2K guy that pops up around 4 or 5 that you can just throw in there if you truly need a punt. But in terms of guys you actually want to roster, I'm thinking 3,100 is the lowest I'm going.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And the Phillies rotating catchers of Tommy Joseph, Cameron Rupp, and Carlos Ruiz have given us some nice cheap options of late. But in tonight's matchup, it's kind of easy to just stay away.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to first base, and I think both the Red Sox guys for me come out kind of on top. I like Ortiz. Lefty-lefty matchup, but Ortiz hits lefties fairly well. Obviously, the way he's hitting this season, you can take him against almost anyone at this point. But I also like Hanley. I mean, hitting well of late, hitting lefties again. So I think he's kind of an intriguing option. I think I'm going to take that righty-lefty matchup just a little more and roll with Hanley tonight.
Yeah, they're pretty much every night money. So I'm obviously in on both of those borderline cash plays. If you want to pay up, that's just the price would be difficult if you wanted to get Sale in there as well. But yeah, definitely guys I'm looking at there. I mean, the normal cast of characters, Rizzo, the Cubs. I mean, they're always kind of intriguing. But I do like Ortiz and Hanley better than that. I don't think I'm touching Goldschmidt tonight. I don't like Pujols in that range. I think you just obviously play Ortiz over him. Cabrera's the one that makes me think in that range in terms of maybe hedging off Ortiz.
Would it be the 7 homers in the last 10 games? Because, I mean, he's absolutely crushing. So I do like Hellickson a lot tonight. So Cabrera's a great option as well. That whole Detroit team, I think they're a great stack.
Yeah, definitely. Moving a little lower. I mean, we were both looking at Byung-Ho Park. I think that's an interesting price and an interesting matchup at only 3,700. So, and he's obviously got some home run opportunity and upside. So that's definitely a guy you're looking at there.
Yeah, and Abreu 3,600.
Yeah.
Looking at Josh Tomlin reverse splits over the last few years, a big 1.82 home runs per nine, 353 woba allowed to right-handers. Abreu, I know he struggled this season, but 3,600, that price tag at home in that ballpark against Tomlin, who's incredibly home run prone, a lot of upside for that price.
Right. And he struggled, but not like Prince Fielder struggled or Giancarlo Stanton struggled. He's just been, not where he's been in terms of his career averages. So I think there's a decent shot he turns it around tonight. I know you mentioned a Giant stack sort of being contrarian. Brandon Belt, 3,500 against Cashner. That's a pretty
Yeah,
good value.
yeah, they're cheap. And Cashner, I mean, relatively weak arm, hasn't been good for some time. And since 2014, 340 woba allowed. So I think to lefties, I think Belt's certainly an intriguing option at that price tag.
Mm-hmm.
V-Mart, he's another one, 3,400. Obviously, you'd have to pivot off of Cabrera if you wanted to. It makes it always tough to stack those Tigers just because Victor Martinez is in that same position.
And there's a few teams that have this issue where it's like, oh, I already filled that position.
Yeah.
Can you make an exception?
Yeah. Can you add a util?
They are not both standing on first base tonight. So, but yeah, no, that's super frustrating, but obviously something you have to deal with.
Yeah. Second base here, and this was kind of a position that we like, that mid-range a little bit more than the top options. I mean, I'm not quite intrigued with paying it for Cano. I think Kinsler's in a solid spot if you're stacking the Tigers, but as a standalone, 4,800 is a little steep. Joe Panic, 3,800 is a guy I like. I talked about struggles with Cashner. I think Panic hitting the top of the order is kind of just a safe, reliable cash game option.
Yeah, Pedroia obviously in a Red Sox stack. That seems to work quite a bit there. Panic, I like that call. But again, I don't necessarily like the top options tonight. I think Cano is obviously always in play, but other than that, I think I'm moving down to sort of Brandon Phillips 3,400, Starlin Castro 31. I just think that's much more comfortable, especially in terms of roster construction for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one guy, I mean, if you're checking the lineups before, if Jimmy Paredes is in for Toronto at 2,900, I like him a lot in that ballpark there. You look at the Eovaldi, struggled versus lefties, 344 woba allowed, and Paredes, a solid bat. I mean, we used him last year in Baltimore, and he was pretty successful for the first half of the season. And great park factors, great matchup. I think he would be an absolute steal if he finds his way into the starting lineup.
Yeah. And Neil Walker, guys, it was fun yesterday, him sort of stinking the whole time and then getting that home run at the end, but we're not playing him against Straz tonight. So even I'm not. So
just a casual Neil Walker shout out from my main man, Russell.
We're not playing him tonight, guys. Pack it in.
Third base, and this is kind of another situation where, yes, there's some top options, but I think once again I find myself drifting down into a cheaper range here, which works well because I plan on paying him for pitching. And Chris Bryant comes against Waka is not a bad option. I like Todd Frazier. I think he's kind of my guy. Just because he talked about, Tomlin struggling with right-handed bats and Frazier starting to hit the ball well again. So 4K, not a bad price tag at all.
Yeah, you're not going to ever hear me really argue against Chris Bryant or Josh Donaldson, but I do think there's some nice values, like you mentioned, a little cheaper. I'm okay with Beltre pretty much always in tournaments in terms of what I think he can do with power. Frazier, I really like. Jung Ho Kang. I think this is a position that you can pretty easily pay down for. Valencia, 3,400. Castellanos, I mean, is loaded in the middle. So you should not be having tough decisions at third tonight. That should be pretty easy.
Yeah, and Castellanos, 3,400 is kind of my guy in that range. Just because we talked about Hellickson struggles and the big home run threat that the Tigers hold. So he's a favorable bat for me, and I think you don't really need to go much lower than that.
No, I actually think you should be staying in this range because those are pretty strong options for those prices. So if there's a position to not punt today, I think you sort of stay in this 3K range at third.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And shortstop, there are some expensive options. I think Bogart's 5,200 if you like paying up, but that's a steep price tag. The $1,000 difference to Machado is kind of favorable for me. I think because he's been struggling, he's going to take a little bit of a price dip. Fisher's been pretty solid against righties, but I'm looking at the long term here. I think Machado kind of comes in and has himself a game tonight.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Definitely someone you'd be willing to pay up for. 900 less than Bogarts and 1,000 less than Seager. So that's very intriguing to me against a pretty weak arm. So yeah, no, I like that a lot.
Yeah, and one thing that kind of catches my eye here is Carlos Correa 3,700. And it's not an ideal matchup just because of how well Tillman has pitched this season and how Correa has been very up and down this year. But as far as the GPP guys at that price, and we know what Correa can do as far as upside and his ceiling, low floor, not a cashing guy for me, but 3,700, I'm going to probably take some risks there tonight.
Oh, yeah, throw him in. Tournament lineups for sure. I mean, that's kind of what you look for in value. You look for guys who have been struggling. Obviously, the matchup isn't perfect, so that's why the value's sort of where it's at. But obviously, you trust the talent of a Correa, and you've already seen it this year. So definitely someone I'm looking at. I mean, it's basically a punt when you can get him at that price. That's basically a punt play for him. So I'm definitely intrigued there.
Yeah, me too. And if you're looking lower, I mean, Alcides Escobar, I still don't mind hitting leadoff there for the Royals at 34. Cozart, so a couple leadoff guys. I mean, that you can get Diaz as well. That I don't mind. So
yeah.
Looking at outfield here, and yeah, the top options are very exciting for me tonight. I mean, Trout, Mookie Betts are kind of the top two for me, but they're also, 10,900 combined. So it's like you're throwing them in your lineups, you're punting everywhere else, but they're in a good spots. I think if maybe you find yourself paying up for one of them, my preference is Betts, but obviously I can't argue with Trout.
Yeah, so let's go back to the last position for a second. I'd much rather pay up for a Machado, and I think that's really your only option, or like that's about as high as you can go if you pay up for both pitchers. You really only have like that one 43 to 45K bullet you can throw out there, and I'd just much rather pay for Machado than look at these guys who just crush your salary.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's a good point. I do like paying up at that.
Yeah.
If I am going in that 45 range.
Right.
But overall, I mean, outfield seems pretty loaded tonight. I think you can kind of go a number of ways. A guy who kind of catches my eye is JD Martinez, 4,300, another Tigers bat against Hellickson. Martinez coming around of late, hitting 350, 5 homers. So this Tigers team's absolutely crushing. I think, one, they're all great standalone plays, but they're also, I mean, besides the Red Sox, kind of my number 2 stack.
I like that call. Trumbo versus Fister in that same vein as Machado. I think you can actually get the Orioles at a pretty decent price tonight. So I'm in on Trumbo. I mean, Adam Eaton, not a perfect matchup, but I think that's pretty intriguing as well.
Yeah, I definitely like him. I mean, consistently kind of goes out there and gets the job done. I mean, whether it's in for extra base hits, just getting on base in general. I mean, he's been pretty solid. How do you feel about the Yankees outfield tonight? As far as, I mean, Beltran, Ellsbury, Gardner, they all kind of sit in a decent spot against Dickey at a not too bad of a price tag.
Yeah, I think that's a tournament lineup you roll out there with those three involved and sort of see what you can work in terms of pitching. But yeah, no, there's definitely upside there tonight. I don't think they're going to be in tons of my lineups because, as you mentioned, there's a loaded outfield tonight. But definitely want to get some shares.
Michael Saunders, 3,800 against Eovaldi is kind of where I'm looking at here. In that mid-range. Eovaldi, 344 wobble a lot to lefties. So Saunders kind of fits the bill for me at 3,800. I think that's kind of a steal, especially in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, definitely. I guess what I'm thinking tonight is you probably want to stay in that 42 to 38 range. Because lower, I don't know if there's as much upside here as there is in that range. You know what I mean? Even with value included, I think there's a lot more pop in that 38 to 42 range.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, in comparison to last night, where it seemed like we just lived in that range. I mean, obviously we had to, but it seemed like there was quite more options and on a smaller
Yeah.
slate. The one kind of who stands out to me is Chris Young at 3,100, notable lefty masher for Boston
Mm,
against Jorge De La Rosa. I think he's a guy who standalone, fine play for me, salary relief, fine for me. Kind of checks off all the boxes, especially with
yeah.
the big total there for Boston.
Yeah, I mean, like most nights, I like Ricard or sort of the same cast of characters, Matt Holliday. But I don't know that they have like the same ceiling and floor that I would need to sort of totally fade this 38 to 42 range.
Melky Cabrera, though, 2,900.
That's in,
Consistently priced down there.
that's intriguing for sure.
So I think him and Young are kind of the only two options. And I mean, those are good options for the price tag. So I think,
Definitely.
I mean, they're rolling around with guys named, Gregor Blanco, Coco Crisp. So I think they're far better plays than they are.
Hmm.
So overall, I think those are kind of the only two options. But I agree. I think you sit in that 4K range and kind of go balance.
Yeah.
So that's going to wrap things up with the DK Daily Trot. Be sure to check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.